on a snowy day. This is the part of the story that I don't get. At that point, had that been me, I would have said, God delivers again, and got out of there. But Benaiah was a fear fighter. He walks over to the pit where the lion is. He looks at the lion. He looks around. He looks at the pit. He looks around. And he makes a decision at that moment that would alter the rest of his life. He jumps into the pit where the lion is, and he fights it. I could almost hear the roar of the lion and the blood-curdling scream of Benaiah as he's in that pit fighting that lion. Suddenly, there's deafening silence. And out climbs Benaiah. Claw marks crisscrossed his chest and his face. He's been mauled, bitten, bleeding. The blood is dripping in the freshly fallen snow as he stands there. But if you think Benaiah looks bad, you ought to see the lion. And he received one of the greatest victories ever recorded in the Bible because he was willing to jump voluntarily into a pit. Nobody would have blamed him if he'd have walked away. Nobody would have said he was a coward. Nobody would have felt less of him if he had just walked away and said, I don't have to fight that. But something in him said, part of my destiny is connected to me defeating this lion, and I'm not going to back up from it. I must take advantage of this God-given opportunity. And the rest of the story is told. Don't miss this. 2 Samuel 23 and 23 said, after this battle, David made him be in charge of his bodyguards. In other words, David, the king of Israel, I could see him in my mind one day as he was sitting in his office, and he had an opening on his staff. He needed a chief bodyguard. And I could see him going through applications of people who wanted an interview for the job. And here's the first application. This is John. He just graduated with a master's degree in security from the University of Jerusalem. And he says, don't think so. And then here's another one. This is Pete. And Pete worked 4 years for the Brinks Armed Chariot. And he decides, I don't know. Let me see what else I've got in here. And here's another application. This guy interned for the palace guards for the summer, and he wants to be my bodyguard. But then in my mind, I could see him come to the application of Benaiah. And under his qualifications, he writes, I killed a lion in a pit on a snowy day, and I've got the rug in front of my fireplace to prove it. I want the job. How many of you know lion killers make good bouncers? David says, that's it. Make him my chief bodyguard. Think about this. When he was chasing that lion, he wasn't just chasing the lion. He was chasing the opportunity of a lifetime. He was chasing his destiny because he became the chief bodyguard for David. But not only did he become the chief bodyguard of David by defeating the fear that was in his life, but he became, in the next administration of Solomon, captain of the host of all of Israel. The second most powerful man. It all happened when he decided to not back up from the scariest moment in his life. Now I want you to listen to me. Why is it important that you conquer fear? Why is it important that you not allow fear to neutralize and paralyze you? If that man had allowed that fear in that situation to paralyze him from doing what he knew was a God-given opportunity, and always remember, God-given opportunity, that is God's gift to you, but what you do with it is your gift back to him. And many people, they want God to give them an opportunity, but they want it lion free. They don't want any problems, but God will never give you the finished finished miracle, He'll give you an opportunity, and He'll say, there are lions in that pit that you've got to fight on snowy days, and if you're willing to go fight them, I'll give you amazing victories. And everything was connected to the risk that he had to take that day. He would have never gone to the second most powerful person in all of Israel had he not been willing to deal with the scariest moment in his life. I believe that we need to understand that fear will rob us of the greatest moments in our life. I thought about in my own life how that my greatest opportunities were my scariest moments. Think about that. This was the greatest opportunity Benaiah would ever have. If he would have walked away, you'd have never heard of him in Scripture again. He'd have never been mentioned in Israel again. He'd never got a job interview with the king of Israel again. He'd have been a nobody and done nothing and missed his purpose in life. But it was his scariest moment that led him to his greatest opportunity. And I thought about in my own life, and I'm sure in yours, it's those scariest moments that if I would have allowed fear, it would have conquered me and I would have missed my greatest opportunities. I remember when the Lord called me to preach, and I announced that I was going to preach. And Richie, my brother, who was a preacher then, much more experienced than me, and he allowed me to preach in one night of his revival that he was having. And that whole week, oh my God, I was so nervous, I was so sick. Oh, I fasted and I prayed and I was nervous and I was sick. And everything inside of me, it was the scariest moment of my life. I still remember that day. I still remember getting in the car with Richie and driving to that place. And the whole time, I was thinking, this is not happening. This is not happening. Do you know the number one fear, according to a recent poll, is speaking in public? Number 2 was death. People would rather die than speak in public. That's literally what the poll says. And you'd have to know me, I was the most shy, backward, introverted person you would ever meet. And now here I am, I'm going to, and it wasn't but about 40 people there, but to me it might as well have been 45,000 people there because I was nervous, I was sick. The whole time I remember during the praise and worship and stuff, I was in the twilight zone. It's like I couldn't get, my mind was racing. What are you doing? What are you going to say? Can you remember it? And I remember the preacher announcing me, and here he comes to preach his first sermon, and I'm sitting there, and the lion was roaring, and everything in me, fear said, don't do it. You're going to make a fool out of it. What if you're going to look stupid. You're going to fail. You're going to be embarrassed. It's going to be bad. And if I'd have listened to that, my scariest moment. But then I walked up, and I did it. It was a pitiful sermon, but I did it. And watch this. My scariest moment became my greatest. It didn't look like it in a church of 40 people then, but it became my greatest opportunity. I didn't know that what I was doing in that little pit there would have ramifications years later. That look, I'm standing and I'm preaching and you're listening. That's God's stuff. And the deal is you got to overcome the scary lions. They'll talk. I remember when I asked Sharice to marry her. It was to marry me. It was one of the scariest moments in my life. Now I think she loves me. I think I'm reading her right. I don't think she'll turn me down. And I could have just let fear talk me out of asking her. But my scariest moment led to my greatest opportunity, the honeymoon. Come on. I thought about my whole life. It seems like every time I had a great opportunity, it was my scariest moment. I thought about when God told me to come to Free Chapel, and I left my denomination and I left everything that I knew, and I came to a people that really didn't know me, and everything was new and everybody was checking me out. And I remember that first Sunday I walked in and I was scared and I was nervous, and I just was reminded of that this week, that I'm so glad something in me made me overcome that fear and jump into that pit.